Today's episode is brought to you by Media for All, which was set up to help encourage more Black, Asian, and other ethnic talent into media, and to provide a support and mentoring network to ensure talent flourishes in the media industry that we all love. If you're looking for a mentor or would like to mentor young ethnic talent, check them out at mediaforall.org.uk, and it is all 100% free.
Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week, also, I have the pleasure and privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is no different. I'm on a call with Martin Leguay, who is Director, VP of Marketing at PeoplePerHour. So thanks for joining the call, Martin. I really appreciate that. Could you give the audience a bit of background on who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So I'm currently, as you said, in charge of marketing at PeoplePerHour. It's a marketplace for freelancers, and I'll come to that, I'm sure, a bit later. But really, first of all, I want to start. Might not sound like it, but I'm actually French, and I arrived in the UK about 20 to 30 years ago, and started my career in advertising and kind of graduate program at Ogilvy, and then moved through the agencies as most people do. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I actually took the leap of faith and went client side. Not necessarily the more traditional side of client side, but in the tech and startup world, where I have been working in since. So yeah, that's about me really.
So it's interesting to hear you say you went through the agencies like everybody does. Why is that? Why do you think people are so fluid when it comes to creative businesses like agencies?
Well, I think by moving agencies, you tend to have two polarizing kind of profiles. You've got the the individuals that manage to hold on and to kind of ride the wave within one agency. I think by moving, it's not necessarily seen as a negative. I think it's actually quite a positive, changing work environments, changing client base, and really learning the different skills and giving you the opportunity to work in different cultures as well. So I think there's a real benefit in learning across different agencies, especially the ones that vary in terms of the channel that they're are strongest at, be it above the line, below the line, whatever line that is. So yeah.
So would you give that advice to a student who's just entering the industry to get into an agency and then move around and build up your knowledge from a broad perspective? Or would you advise them to follow the passion, go to the area that they love the most and get a deep level of expertise?
I guess it depends really in terms of, well, if you already have an idea of what you'd like to get into, and this, marketing is has a broad spectrum of skills that are required. And I think there's obviously the more purists, having been an account planner and advertising for about 13 years myself, developing creative briefs really succinctly, just thinking about the creative proposition, the idea, researching it. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there's obviously the CMOs of this world and very much more the kind of side of marketing I'm in now, which is understanding 5 to 10 to 15 different channels or verticals, working heavily in data, working with creative, working with above the line radio and so on, and also product, given that I work in digital. There's an array of skills that you really need to acquire. So it really depends on what floats your boat and what you're more attracted to. But if you're eventually perhaps aiming for a kind of broader marketing role, it's definitely more interesting, I believe, to broaden your skills as early as possible. And come to that, actually, data, I think, which, was present at the time 15 years ago in agencies, but really has become so much more prominent, especially on the client side. And just that, getting involved with data really was kind of a daunting, scary prospect for I think most people. But actually, the numbers don't lie, and by really getting to grasp with data and understanding, reading between the lines of data, you're able to really get to understand, what your strategy is going to become, where the opportunities are, and what success looks like.
So talk to me a bit more about that data piece. So you said it could be daunting. Am I reading into that there wasn't so much data in your role at Ogilvy, and you've had to take on, was it 12, 13, 14, 15 channels of data now? Like what is the challenge, or what were the challenges you had to overcome in order to make that a key part of your role?
Well, I think, it's, I guess, based on the kind of what I call the yin and yang of marketing. There's that emotional, creative side, and then there's that more pragmatic, objective, and data-led side that you need to balance. And I guess in being a creative strategist for so long, that the research substantiate and validated your ideas. So you came up with ideas most of the time, or thoughts, and kind of help construct, the validity of that thought and idea with some stats, some research, and you would hunt for that data. And I think that's a very different approach to, really looking at the data firsthand, looking at what you have first, and then distilling some insights from that. I'm not saying that's always the case, but I think data really now has become, especially for digital business, is the driving force. It's really what's going to shape where you're going to focus your interest in, what channel you're going to put your budget in. I guess what is a bit daunting about it is that there's a lot of it. And you can really, I think I got to a point where I was so involved with the data that it can really make your head spin. And creating reports, creating dashboards, there's a kind of data overkill that can really distract you. And what's important is having this data, this periphery data, as I call it, to help you give more context to your strategy, or to the business, or to an insight. But really going back to, okay, what are my top KPIs? What are the top 2-3 numbers at the end of the day if I'm kind of getting disorientated, or getting too involved with the data, that I can go back to and check myself and check how I'm performing, let alone how the business is performing.
So you talk a bit about the overwhelm of data, and I'm sure in your role there's overwhelm on all kinds of different levels. How do you deal with that? What tools and techniques do you have for resetting yourself when you have become overwhelmed?
Well, I guess what's important is, at the start of every year, certainly I do anyway, with, reevaluating last year, looking at new budgets, looking at new channels, where you're going to, your business as usual kind of channels, or looking at where you're going to innovate, where you're going to find growth. At the end of the day, that strategy needs to hold on a white piece of paper of A4, and it really needs to be distilled to as simply as possible. Obviously, then it becomes much more complex, and you deep dive into channels like CRM with notifications and web notifications and click-throughs and emails and all that, or you go into above the line, or you go into multi-touch kind of acquisitional strategy for performance marketing. Everything's, as you get deeper into it, becomes more complex. But you have to retract back to, I would say, a white piece of paper, which has a very simple target, a very simple approach, which helps you clear your mind. So that's, I think, helps. Also, the percentage of areas you're looking to explore, new channels or new initiatives, new projects, is important, but that percentage needs to be still, I think, relatively minimal to the core kind of channels that you're focusing on. those core channels are really the ones that should work, and you stick to really what works. Whereas the innovation channels or the innovation of new initiatives need to really represent about 20% of your efforts, I would think.
So in the last 5 years or so, what has been the best investment of your time, energy, or money?
I guess, I mean, money, probably buying a scooter to get to work and taking half the time. But in terms of my time, it really has helped to deep dive into, I've hired multiple teams over the last few years, and really spending time with each vertical and each individual, because obviously the idea being that I hire people that have a skill set that is slightly different to mine or that complements mine, but has definitely a deeper understanding of that vertical. There's definitely, it's very hard and very rare, and I wouldn't really believe someone who said, well, I'm a CMO or I'm a marketing director and I understand all the channels and I'm an expert of all. It's I would think near impossible. So really that time that you spend learning from individuals and investigating with each individual that sits within CRM or performance marketing or brand director, and investing, asking the right questions and listening to their opinion and listening to their ideas is really a great way to build your skill sets. But also it's really interesting. It's just really interesting to kind of diversify your day, your week, your year into, I guess, different little worlds of marketing, which definitely are very different.
So how do you manage someone or a group of people who know way more than you about one of those channels, but yet they're looking to you for leadership and guidance?
Yeah, it's always I guess, I mean, you need to be able to throw the ball back, and sometimes you can't, because let's be honest, you got to start somewhere. So you put your hand up and you say, look, I know CRM, I'm not an expert at it, but you are. However, I understand the logic. I understand that, what the consumer wants, what the user wants, and I can read the data. So surely by connecting these dots and with your skill sets, we can, come to, creating much more productive, much better work. So I think it's really setting the kind of objectives, setting the requirements, but then for the user or for the team member really to then make that work and present that back to you. But I think it's really about a partnership. I mean, it's not at all a kind of, kind of pyramid structure within a team. The role that I'm doing, I see often, is really more about joining the dots than kind of dictating a ruthless strategy and objectives from the top. It's just making sure that, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. But the teamwork is often what, they want as well. They want someone to they have ideas to come to you and for you to test them or to build on them. So it's more of a partnership than a kind of, boss to employee relationship.
If you love all things innovation and want to understand how brands plan to emerge stronger from the current situation, don't forget to check out MadFest London on the 11th and 12th of November. My good friend Dan at MadFest knows how to put on a cracking event, and there's always plenty of amazing speakers, beer and cool people to meet. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So we are loosely at the halfway point here. So we're going to move across onto your shiny new object, which is the future of work. which sounds pretty broad and vague. Could you give the audience a bit of clarity on what you mean by the future of work and why it's your shiny new object?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, so I work for PeoplePerHour.com, and it's a freelancer marketplace that's been around for 12 years now. And essentially it connects freelancers with people looking for their skills, i.e., a designer or a web developer or even a translator. There's about 3 million freelancers on our platform, so it's quite sizable. So what's quite interesting is that obviously we've been at the forefront of the so-called future of work for the last decade, really. And we haven't really seen that many drastic changes, obviously, until this year. And I think really what I find fascinating is that, I think it's David Kuplan who wrote the book about Generation X and said that the 9-to-5 is barbaric. The idea that, why are we still, like ants following this ruthless, structural, unflexible day of the 9-to-5, when we fully know that, there should be flexibility, that the work-life balance, not everyone's lives are the same, not everyone's skills are the same or requirements are the same. And that we should really treat every day of the week like a Wednesday. And he goes on to think about actually the weekends will go away and really pushes that idea quite far. But really what I find very interesting is just looking at, obviously what's happening at the moment and just going back to the office. I'm obviously French, my family's in France, and back in France, I just saw that about 80% of the offices have gone back to full capacity. Which is much lower in the UK. And I think the perception, the cultural perceptions of, being present, the amount of hours you do is what's going to get you the most value and reward, is kind of different from culture to culture, from company to company. And the same applies to the financial sector, which apparently is the one that's most open, interestingly enough, to flexible working. So I think just the way things are shaping, and that we've had to accelerate really the future of work, and that it's actually here, it's present. Obviously, some people have coined it the new normal, but just that the idea of working remotely, having virtual teams on a global scale, is something that was quite alien to even the UK economy and culture and working culture 10 years ago, and probably still a year ago. Whereas now we're seeing the acceptance of working with freelancers the other side of the world and building a website or building virtual teams that you don't necessarily need to have sitting next to you, and that you can actually benefit from that flexibility. That's not to say I don't think the offices and all of that will go away, and I still think, being present is still very much important.
So I want to jump back to a comment you made. I can't remember the name of the person that you're referencing, but you said every day should be like a Wednesday and the weekend should go away. Sounds fascinating. Can you qualify that a little?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I guess, treating every hour, every day, just like a currency. That, be it a Saturday, or why should we be treating a Saturday the way it is? I guess it goes back to the Industrial Revolution and having weekends in factories and needing these kind of structures. And that we're very much more in a fluid economy of flexibility, where the needs are, at the end of the day, there's seasonalities in the year. There's also peaks within the week, peaks within the day. The needs of someone's role within a company will vary from time to time. Also, from a personal level, I can speak for myself that there's certainly times of the year, or perhaps some might be, my wife might be having a baby, or there might be also kind of factors that come into my life, which means that I will have to flex my work around them to a certain extent. However, there might be times where I'm much more performing and I'm much more at the forefront of my work, where I can really flex my life around my work. So it's really getting that balance, that it's not something that's rigid, which I think Google just announced actually last week, that they said that Fridays should be regarded as a stress-free day, and given the epidemic, that most people should be encouraged to take their Friday off.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I think last week's episode of the podcast was with Ravleen Beeston, who's a managing director for sales for Microsoft in the UK, and her point was all around, taking Friday, certainly working from home, because if you down tools at 5:30, 6 or whatever it is, your weekend starts at 5:30, 6:30, not 7 or 8:30 or whatever time you're getting from your commute. And I think there's really something to that. But I think the missing piece for me is the communication of when we are able to put work first or family first, and when it is sensible for us to work from home or work from the office. Like, I don't think there is a vernacular that exists that allows us to articulate that. And certainly from my own experience, one of the team said, before lockdown, if someone was working from home, even though we all understand we had to work from home from time to time, irrespective of that intellectual understanding that working from home was a positive thing, there was still an emotional response to it as being less good work, because there isn't really a way, other than stating I'm at home or I'm at work, that doesn't account for the type of work that you're doing. So do you think we need to develop a new form of vernacular or a way of talking about how we do different types of work and when, or is that just never going to happen?
Yeah, no, I completely agree that obviously, the remote working applies itself, much easier. For example, in our company, we have developers and a data team. Actually, our head of data, he's based in Cyprus, and I've met him once, but I work with him every single day. But our language is data, and it's very manual, and it's very different to working with creatives or on a brand campaign where we have to constantly throw ideas, be in a room, brainstorm. So obviously the needs of, whether, depending on what industry we're in, what role we have, really varies. And I guess the whole point is that this approach of full flexibility doesn't exist across the whole industry. I think the full flexibility, i.e., is really down to being able to decide, depending on your role, depending on what's kind of work stream you're in, that you have the flexibility to decide. And it's really that ability to give the responsibility to the employee and give them the freedom, and really, I guess, valuing their skill sets and their own decision making to make that decision for themselves. And this top-down structural approach, which has been around for years and decades, really needs to be reevaluated.
And so do you think that junior people or grads or people coming into a business or the industry for the first time are able to do that? Not belittling their intelligence, but can someone who's not had experience of like a full-time office work or full-time remote work and the blend of those things really be able to make a mature choice? Or is it that generation will just demand complete flexibility, and it's up to our generation to deal with that?
Yeah, no, completely. And it's a very good point. I think as a junior, really looking up to have a mentor and to feed off them, they will likely require a lot more assistance and to be present, be it physically or virtually. And I think it's the same to be said really with people starting a new job during the lockdown. I have many friends and people I know that did that, and I know it was very tough because they hadn't met yet their their team, and you have preconceptions and there's miscommunication. So it's far from perfect, even though we have so many tools to communicate with nowadays. So there is exactly a case in point of needing those younger graduates, junior individuals, which need more structure, whereas it's I guess a little bit more suitable for the senior members of the team to be able to fill their day and not need that structure and structure themselves. So that's really something for companies to think about, depending on how they structure the teams and their business. But I think the philosophy of wanting the flexibility and getting the flexibility, because when you look at platforms, when you look at the digitization of so many industries, that accessibility not only to communication channels like Slack and Zoom and so on, but also for individuals that are, for example, in self-employment or setting up a business, that 20 years ago they weren't able to access at the click of a button and being able to, get the skill sets just for a flexible amount of time of those individuals and work very well remotely and build their business working from their home. And so I think that flexibility and that accessibility to talent on the virtual, on the virtual web is quite interesting.
So do you think that this future of work that you envision is going to mean that marketing is better? Or will it mean that it'll be different, or will it be cheaper? What will this remote working, using virtual teams, coming into the office one day a week, or what in 5 years, when we look back on this time, what do you think will have changed?
Part of me, the romantic side of advertising and marketing is definitely, seeing a shift, or I've definitely witnessed a shift away from big ideas to really smaller, better performing ideas. Not to say that the big ideas don't exist and they don't have legs and they don't perform, but that will, in the realm that we're in, where everything has to be really measured and has to have a return on investment within a very short amount of time. I think people are leaning more towards, digital tools and shorter initiatives, shorter campaigns, shorter marketing initiatives across many more touch points, which, dilutes really the opportunity for big ideas. So for me, I think that's perhaps, the area which I find perhaps, will be lost a little bit. That being said, being an optimist, I believe, there's so many areas of innovation, of great ideas and opportunities that the quest for new ideas will remain. But the leniency on tools, on the digital space, is going to be more and more prevalent. We've just seen, already in the last 6 months since the pandemic, that a number of people are coming to our platform to digitize their business, being retail, being e-commerce platform, being even lawyers. So I think there's a real need to embrace the digital, but that might have an impact on the creative and the great creative work that can be achieved.
So unfortunately, we have come to the end of the podcast now. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would you like them to do that?
LinkedIn. Yeah, sure. LinkedIn or via email, or they can reach me on Instagram should they wish to. Leguay @Leguay on Instagram.
Wow, in 80 odd episodes, you're the first person that's offered their Instagram, so respect for that. So if someone was going to reach out to you on Instagram or elsewhere, how would you like them to do that? What makes a good outreach to you? What stands out amongst the hundreds of emails that you must get on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think something that's slightly a little bit disruptive. I think we see so many formulaic emails and kind of sales pitches that it's really about being honest and a little bit thought provoking.
Martin, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you very much for your time too.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That'd just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.